I'm Amy Johnson. I'm a sophomore at RIT, and I'm from Texas.
And I'm Theresa Johnson, from Texas also, of course. And I work at the Educational Resource Center on Deafness, located at the Texas School for the Deaf in Austin, Texas. I wanted Amy to be involved for her transition planning and the IEP planning right from the get-go. So I brought her to America when she was 6. So the first year she was here, I said, come on, you're going to go along with me to the meeting. And she didn't understand really what was going on, of course. She was very young. But I would explain to her in advance, this is your meeting for your school. And then we're going to talk about your goals for the future. So slowly she began to understand what was going on during the meeting. And then she became more and more involved in her meetings.
When I was in first grade, I was dragged out of my super fun classroom, and I had to go to these meetings. And I would walk into the room, and it was this huge table with these people sitting around it. Like, what is this? Who are these people? I honestly thought I was in trouble. I was totally lost. I had no idea what these meetings were for. So then my mom explained to me, these are your IEP meetings, and I want you to see what they look like and get to know who the people are. I still wasn't really sure. I had no idea what was going on. I really just sat back and took it all in. I had an interpreter there, and I didn't really understand all of the sign language. I was just learning at the time. So then again, the next year, and continuing after that, I kept going to these meetings, but I still really wasn't understanding what they were for. I sort of had an idea of the concept, but not totally. Then later, when I went to Texas School for the Deaf, I had to go back to these meetings all over again. But slowly I was starting to recognize people and know who they were. I recognized this teacher. Then there was the teacher who helped me with my English. Then I saw my math teacher, and I started to recognize some faces. In 7th and 8th grade, I was really starting to get the idea of what these meetings were about, and I was starting to build more confidence. But I still sort of kept quiet. I was afraid to interject, and every once in a while I would add something. But everyone was really taking over for me, and finally I realized that was not what I wanted. I said, all right, this is my time. This is time for me to take over these meetings. And Mom helped along the way to get me ready to take over and learn the process of how to do these meetings. After that time, I was able to set up a PowerPoint. Mom would look it over with me, and we would discuss how it would go. I sort of had this list of all of my expectations and things that I wanted. It went over so well. The teachers and people in the meeting loved it. They finally had an understanding and an idea of what I wanted, and they were able to keep all of these things in mind. It really started this awesome discussion of how they could help me for the future. And I kept doing these from then on. And I just learned how to succeed by showing what I wanted in these meetings, and I was able to achieve all of my goals. You know, even when I had these goals and I was striving for them, they were right there behind me, and they actually knew how to support me because of my PowerPoints. And in the end, it was the PowerPoints that got me there.
Yes, I am so proud of Amy because I remember she was young. She was, 6 or 7 years old, and I would force her to go to these meetings, and I would explain in advance at home, try to help her to understand what we were doing. But I know it was over her head, and she really didn't understand a lot of the things that we were expecting from a young child. But also, I remember the school. The people there didn't understand either. And I'd bring in my child with me, and I'd request an interpreter in advance, and I'd bring her, and the staff would look at me and say, why are you bringing this young child to the meeting? I knew enough to know that she was smart, and she would understand eventually, and it would be beneficial for her to observe and start to understand slowly what was going on in the meeting. So I knew she had the capacity to take up her own meetings, eventually herself later. So, it started slightly awkward in the beginning, but she would slowly understand, and then eventually she became very confident in herself, and I could see that evolution in her, that change. The first 2 or 3 meetings, she would be a little teary, but then she would throw out a little bit of feedback or opinions or express what she wanted, say, no, I don't want that. And it was good. I would say, let her voice for herself, express her own opinions, and then when she would say, when she was, I think, in 8th grade, it was obvious that she was ready to take over leadership of her own meetings. So we practiced at home, and she made a PowerPoint, and she wanted to share what types of things she wanted to do with the staff. And she loved the computer, so it was easy for her to develop her own PowerPoint. So that's how she began the process of assuming leadership for her meetings. And then after that, she was all on her own. It was her meeting. It was not the staff meeting or my meeting. It was her meeting. So, the last few meetings, I rarely said anything. And the principal would say, Mom, do you want to say anything? And I would say, no, it's Amy's meeting. I'm here to support her, but it's her meeting. It was really a good process. It was wonderful from start to finish.
In freshman year, you start thinking about college and you start getting nervous because you're not really sure what you're going to do. So I sat down with my mom because she had been to college in the past and had a lot of experience, and I knew she could give me some really good advice. So we brainstormed some different ideas of things I could do or what I should try to get prepared for college and for the future. So in my meetings, I decided I would start focusing on what I would really need to do for the next years and how to prepare. I didn't want a heavy workload, but I knew I needed to improve some skills. In your 3rd year of high school, that's when you really start to focus on what your major might be, and you really have to pick it because pretty soon you're going to be going off to college, and you don't want to arrive and have no idea of what you want to do. They offered little surveys that we could take, sort of questionnaires to find out what our interests were and what major might fit us. And I decided I would try a few out and see if they would benefit me. And there were a few answers I got for my major, and I decided that in the first semester, the fall semester of school, I would try working in that field. And the first one was working with little kids. And I enjoyed it, and I had a really great time working with the children, but it didn't really feel like it fit me. I had a lot of fun, but it didn't seem like it was really for me. So there were other options that I had from that questionnaire, and I decided I would try those out in the next semester. One of them was design marketing. I interviewed for this job, and I got in. And I was working on the computer doing this design marketing, and it was really complex. I seemed to really enjoy it, and I had a good time doing it, but later on realized that it just wasn't for me. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. And I really wanted to find something that would fit me and suit me for college, and I just knew in my heart that these things weren't it. In my senior year, I really figured out what I wanted to do, and I knew that I was passionate about science and medicine. And I knew this because I had volunteered at the University of Texas, and it was research. It was mechanical engineering, and we were doing a research project on the topic of photopolymers. It just was so fascinating, and I absolutely loved it. In my senior IEP meeting, we started to discuss my summer program, and we also started discussing that, I would be applying to college and all of these next steps I needed to take for the future. And I started talking to the group about, the things that I would need to prepare for college. I did not want to show up unready and feeling lost. I wanted the group to give me some networking opportunities and some references, things that could really benefit me once I arrived on campus. I really wanted the process to just go smoothly and transition really well, and I was able to because I had those supports behind me.
The IEP meetings, I think, are very complex. They can be intimidating sometimes. Imagine if you're not familiar with education rules and the expectations. If you're not familiar with the deaf culture, the deaf ways, if you're a hearing parent, it's the first time you've been exposed to everything during the IEP meetings. Personally, I have the benefit of knowing sign language. I think especially for parents who've tried to figure out what's going on, how they can be involved with the IEP meetings, to remember the value of the student going to the meeting. Imagine if the student is there and they're trying to have a voice and being involved in their own planning. If the staff are aware that the student's presence, they will probably tend to explain things more in depth. They would slow the process down. Maybe not use such educational terminology that the student or parents wouldn't be familiar with. I think it's very beneficial for the student to be involved. There are many reasons to learn how to take leadership is one benefit, but it also helps himself and the parent to understand the process and then to slow the process down. And take the time to ask questions. Ask the staff to explain what's going on. The whole process is more beneficial for everyone as a result. What I saw during the process of the IEP meetings, when Amy took leadership for her own transition meetings, the development of her PowerPoint, her presentation, developing her resume, planning for her meetings, really helped her think in advance about what she needed to request for during the meeting, what she needed to make clear and emphasize during the meetings. Also, I saw the evolution from the staff, the teachers, and the faculty during the IEP meetings. They're very complex. There's a lot of paperwork, and typically the staff are so busy and they're trying to rush through and fill out all the paperwork for all the students. They're looking down. They're checking off everything they need to do for the paperwork. They're not looking at the student. They're talking, they're busy, they're looking down. But when Amy was arrived at the meeting, we requested in advance from the principal a projector and a screen. And she told the principal, I want to do a presentation during my meeting. And as she came in, the staff were really surprised. They weren't expecting that. The staff expected a typical meeting where they would just rush through the paperwork, only looking up occasionally. No. Now, Amy stood up and the staff looked at her. And the whole effect of the meeting was it was all about Amy, not the paper. Everyone put down their pens, they looked up, they paid attention to Amy and what she had to say about her goals, her dreams, her preferences, and it was not about the paperwork.
So before my next IEP meeting, I discussed everything over with Mom and what we would include. I really understood what my strengths, my weaknesses, my interests were, and I really wanted to be able to share that with my teachers. I also wanted to start including my resume because it would really help them understand what my interests were and what I wanted to do in the future. It also gave them an idea of what experience I had. So when we went into the meeting, I had my VR counselor there as well as the other teachers, and they were all able to sort of keep my interest in the back of their minds to help prep me for the future. I wanted it to be a group effort. I wanted them to be there to support me for my future. And I wanted to be able to trust them, and I knew that from my PowerPoint, they would know. I didn't want to get to college and just be completely lost. I was able to thank them for being there to support me, and because of my PowerPoint, they They gave me networking opportunities and sent me all of these references and resources I could use. And now I'm a sophomore in college, and it's just been such an exciting time, and I can't wait to see what the future holds.